The new M3 MacBook Air, is it worth the upgrade? Welcome back to the channel. So Apple just released its M3 MacBook Air. I thought it was going to be later in the month, but you never know what Apple's going to do. You actually know one thing. They're never going to ship anything with more than 8 gigs of RAM on the base model. Okay, as somebody that just picked up an M2 MacBook Air here with 512GB SSD and 16 gigs of RAM, I'm a little concerned, but let me talk about this. So this was actually $13.99. I bought this for $13.99 with those upgrades. If you were to get the same M3 model of this, the M3 MacBook Air, it would be $16.99. So it's a savings of about $300 that I saved. And the question is, are these changes from the M2 to the M3 enough to kind of justify that $300 cost difference? And that's what we're going to talk about. And if you bought an M2 recently, watch the whole video because I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised in what I got to say. Let's find out. All right, so let's go through all the changes that actually are on the M3 Air right now. We're going to go through all the different changes, starting with the CPU, which is probably the most important thing, right? At least we think so. So the M3 chip's obviously replacing the M2 chip on the Air. Now, the thing that's kind of crazy is let's just take a look at what's coming from Apple's website. You tell me, I'm going to tell you some stuff here that's going to be kind of hidden behind the scenes, and it's going to make you wonder just how much faster is the M3 than the M2. This is actually really kind of concerning to me. If we look over here, first of all, this is their website. It says M3 chip right here, MacBook Air. It says it's 1.6 times faster than the MacBook Air with the M1 chip, right? So from the M1 chip to the M3, it's 1.6 times faster. So that only leaves a little bit of a room for the M2 chip, which they don't even talk about in here. I mean, I could even see if it was 1.3, but they would probably say that in here, but they're not even saying that. They're not even listing it anywhere in here, which is crazy. So that's their website right there. And we're going to get into something here in a second that's even kind of more important. Here it says up to 1.6 times faster. Now it's saying 13 times faster, which is funny, than the Intel Macs, all right? The Intel MacBook Air, 13 times. Well, my wife has one, and it's basically not 13 times as fast. It doesn't take 13 times as long to open an app, or 13. It's going to be 13 times on very specific things that they found. So if you have an Intel Mac and you're happy with it, it's not going to be 13 times faster. That is kind of a crazy thing. So I think it might be twice as fast, maybe 1.5 times as fast in opening apps, but not 13 anyway. But let's keep going. All right, if we look back at the screen over here, here's what I was just talking about. There's a little link in here. It says go inside the M3 chip. See it right here? I'm going to click on that, and then we're going to scroll down. This is where it gets really concerning. So here we are. It says, look at this graph here. This is pretty crazy. It says it's 13 times faster than the Intel Mac down here, right? But look at this. The M2 chip finally shows its head here. Here is the line. It's literally neck and neck with the M3. Here's the M3 up here. Here's the M2. Here's the M1 down here. Now this is only, it's saying that the M3 is 1.6 times faster than this one way down here. But look how close the M2 is. I mean, that's got to be what, 1.1 times faster, 1.05 times faster? It's barely faster than the M2. And this is coming from Apple's own graphs here. Take a look at this. Now, if you go with the 15-inch model, it might be a little bit of a difference, but I can't tell. Well, they're doing both 15-inch, but still, it's very, very small. It's a little bit bigger difference maybe. And then you have the M1 Air down here, which is, again, only 1.5 or 1.6 times slower than this. And then over here, you can see that it's saying that the baseline Air over at the Intel is way back over here. And that's what they're putting is the 13 times. This literally makes no sense to me. You can see the difference is almost nothing. And then even down here, I mean, it's just crazy. Look what they do down here. M3 Air for video editing performance, and then they just put it against an Intel i7 down here, 2.8 times as fast. But where's the M2? I mean, is it the exact same? Where's the M1? It doesn't even list them in this graph. This is just really concerning to me. So you know that, obviously, if you think about this for a second, if you really bought the M2 like I did, the M2 Air, you don't want to lose any sleep over this on performance because just by their graph alone here, it's showing you that there's very, very little difference if there's any at all. All right, the second change on the M3 MacBook Air is going to be something that everyone was asking for, but it's done a little bit weird. It's basically that you can use now up to 2 screens, but you have to use them a very specific way. You actually have to take a Mac like this, you have to close the Mac up, and then you have to use it in clamshell mode, and you have to have it closed. And then you can put up 2 screens, and it's going to actually be able to let you work on 2 screens instead of 1. But the issue with this is then you lose the capability of your keyboard and your trackpad. You have to have an external Bluetooth keyboard and a trackpad or a mouse. So it's a little bit different than you think. And I don't even know why they're doing this. This is kind of crazy. I mean, are they taking that away from the M2? They probably can do it on there as well. They just don't want to give it to you. And then the weird thing I was thinking about is that new M3 Pro model, that kind of the one that starts at $1599, that doesn't even have it. But I did some research and it says due to a software update coming out very soon, they're going to add that feature because they pretty much much have to save face. Obviously, if the Pro doesn't have it and the Air does, that's a little crazy. So they're going to be adding it to that through a software update. But can they add it to the M2 then? Anyways, besides the point, that's probably the biggest change if you really need it. So if you need the 2 screens and you can work in clamshell mode, that might be one reason you might consider upgrading. But really, if you have an M2 or even an M1, I don't know. All right, so the third thing that's going to change on the M3 MacBook Air is on the Midnight version only, they're adding that anti-fingerprint coating to it, which is kind of what I complained about when I was buying this. So I think that's a big change for a couple people, not many people that care about fingerprints, but only on the Midnight Blue. They're not even adding it to the other systems. But on top of that, I just saw a video where someone had one of these things, and there's still fingerprints visible. Maybe not as much. It does help, obviously, but it's even, I think, more visible than the Midnight Black, than this blue color. So I don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, it's not going to be that big of a change, I don't think. And if you're going to be buying the M2 like I did, and the fingerprints bug you like it did, get a skin like this. I'm going to put a link in the description if you guys like this skin. Take a look at this. Click, click, click. That's called, I think it's called Banff or something, but they have tons of different skins on there. It works great. And I'll tell you one thing, after I did this, I didn't think I was going to like a skin like this, but I have it on the top and the bottom, and it gives you, it's almost like a security blanket for your Mac. I don't like it being thick. I don't like cases. I do like the design, but this is with a fingerprint magnet. I'm leaving, the inside open, but on the back and the front, I put this on here, and now I can slide it on tables. I can do whatever I want without worrying about scratches. So I'll have a link in here. You get a code where you get a discount on them. Helps me out, but at the same time, I actually love it, and I like the look of it. So if you like that, try it, and the company's called Fishskins. All right, and then the fourth change for all this money is it actually added Wi-Fi 6E. It used to have Wi-Fi 6 like this does. It went to Wi-Fi 6E. Now, a lot of people are going to say, well, that shouldn't matter because I don't have a router that supports that. In reality, it does, because it's going to obviously give you a little bit more speed, even if you're using an older router. They've tested it before, so it does give you a little bit more range, gives you a little bit more speed, sometimes because it's less congested networks and stuff like that. So overall, it is a good upgrade. Now, the M2 should have had this. The M2 Air should have had this because the M2 Mac Mini already had it, and they didn't put it on this for some reason. It's Apple being its finest again, trying to just work its way up. So now it's on the M3, so if that's really important, it's really if you have really, really high-end internet and you want to get X amount more out of it, it's probably worth it to you, maybe. For me, it's not, though. I work really close to my router, and I got 200-300 megabytes per second, plenty of speed for me. But for others, it might be worth it. All right, so at the end of the day, people are just going to say, should you really upgrade? And I'm going to tell you a couple things. Number one, if you have an M1 or an M2 MacBook Air, you saw that it's 1.5 or 1.6 times faster than the M1, but it's like this much faster than the M2. So I don't think you should really upgrade unless you absolutely like one of these features, like the dual monitors or something like that. Other than that, there's no need for the performance. You're not going to really notice that in day-to-day stuff. Even on video editing, it's going to be very minute. I showed some examples of that before, so I wouldn't really worry about that too much. And then if you have an Intel Mac, I just did a video on this. Obviously, you should probably upgrade if you think it's going to be substantial for you. But if you're already doing your workflow and you're fine with the Intel Mac, don't worry about it. Just continue to use it until you can't use it any longer, right? If it works for you, don't change it. Do not give Apple your money unless you absolutely have to. I love Apple, but they don't need any more money unless you want to pay them. But the bigger question is, should you buy an M2 MacBook Air right now? Like this one that's upgraded with 16 gigs of RAM, 512 gigabyte SSD, stuff like that for $13.99 if you can find them. That's, I guess, the bigger question that we want to talk about. Now, the thing that I'm kind of sad about, though, is if you look at Apple's website, they actually stopped selling the M1 MacBook Air finally. Rest in peace. And they actually stopped selling on their website the M2 15-inch MacBook Air, all right, for some reason. But they're going to still sell the 13-inch M2 MacBook Air. So that M2 MacBook Air is kind of taking the place of the M1. It's going to linger there. But getting the 15-inch M2 MacBook Air is going to be very difficult right now. So that's where the question comes in. If you can find sales, if people like Best Buys and other places have kind of old stock of this stuff, the price is probably going to go down even more so than that $300 that I saved by going with the upgrades. So if you can get $300 or $400 off, and what I just showed you is only those 4 things that are different, and the performance is really minimal, I think the M2 is still a good viable option, the 15-inch, right? And of course, the 13-inch M2 will be a great option because right now it's selling for $200 cheaper than the M3, but it's also going to probably go way down. I've seen it for $899, and then $799 is probably going to be on sale a little bit, even especially around Christmas, maybe $750. So you're going to probably get $200 to $300 off the M3 version of even that smaller version. And overall, I think that's a good trade-off for what you're kind of giving up here. I mean, obviously, if you don't get the Midnight Black, it doesn't even matter because you're not going to get the fingerprint resistance anyway. So it's just those other 3 things that I talked about. And the performance is not really a big issue unless you really know you need that. So it's really just 2 things I talked about. If you don't need the dual screens, then you don't need that. And it's just one thing, which is the Wi-Fi 6E. So that's really all there is. Okay, so I'm going to wrap all this up. You can see that I just wanted to show you, based on Apple, they finally kind of published something on their website showing the difference between the M2 and the M3. And now you know why they don't use that on any of the other graphs or any of their percentages, and they use the M1 or the Intel Max. So unless Apple publishes something that says this is the specific difference, I mean, we have benchmarks out there by all these different websites and stuff, but this is coming from Apple, and they would probably sugarcoat it the best they could. What was that, 1.1 times, even that? I mean, at least based on that graph. I mean, I'm not a mathematician, but I can see, what the graph is, and it's a very, very small percentage, right? So overall, that was even for video editing, which is one of the higher tasks. But you tell me, am I wrong? Am I missing something here? And at the end of the day, I think you should pick up what's best for you. The M2, if it's cheap enough, buy that. The M3, if you can get a good deal on it, get that. If you have an M1, you don't need to really upgrade unless you absolutely have to. And we'll call it a day. We'll talk to everybody soon. Peace.